There is a lie that women have been living for decades, and this lie is sabotaging their love lives in ways they can't even imagine. For years, I've heard the same question repeated in countless ways during therapy sessions. What do men really want? And every time I hear this question, I feel a mix of compassion and frustration, because the question itself reveals the deeper issue, an issue far more ancient than dating, more subtle than psychology, and more tragic than heartbreak. It shows me how many women have been shaped to chase answers outside themselves, while the truth they're yearning for has always been quietly waiting within. Because the reality is this: women have been conditioned to sculpt their identities according to what they think men desire, softening one edge, brightening another, dimming their fullness in hopes of becoming more appealing. Yet the irony is almost poetic. Mature men, the kind who have lived, lost, learned, and risen, are not drawn to a woman who molds herself into an image of desirability. They are drawn to the woman who refuses to mold herself for anyone. The woman who stands in her truth so completely that she becomes unforgettable without even trying. In my decades of guiding people through the wilderness of their emotional lives, I've witnessed transformations that still leave me humbled. Women who entered the room exhausted from decoding male behavior, drained from performing attractiveness, suddenly became magnetic the moment they stopped performing altogether. Attraction didn't bloom from strategy, it bloomed from self-return. And the shift was so profound, so visceral, that even their posture changed, as though stepping back into themselves reawakened a natural power that had always been there. This isn't magic, it's psychology in its most human form. You see, the male brain, especially after years of navigating superficial encounters and emotional noise, develops an uncanny sensitivity to authenticity. A mature man may not always articulate what he feels, but his nervous system recognizes emotional truth faster than his mind can interpret it. When he encounters a woman who is grounded, genuine, and emotionally sovereign, something ancient stirs in him, a mixture of curiosity, admiration, and a quiet relief, as though he has finally arrived somewhere safe. But authenticity, the kind that captivates rather than simply comforts, has specific qualities most women never learn to cultivate. One of the most compelling is emotional presence without the hunger for approval. Imagine a woman who can hold her own energy in a conversation, who doesn't lean forward with invisible hope, who doesn't speak to impress or silence herself to be agreeable. A woman who can disagree without hostility, who can sit in silence without anxiety, who doesn't contort herself in fear of losing someone she hasn't even chosen yet. This emotional steadiness creates an effect I've often called active relaxation in the male brain, a dual state where he feels both calm and awakened. Calm because her presence carries no chaos, awakened because rarity always awakens instinct. Men in therapy rarely describe the women they cherish with words like perfect or amazing or spectacular. They describe them as real, grounded, safe. Words that reveal a deep truth. Mature psychological attraction is fueled by substance, not spectacle. And nowhere is that substance more visible than in what I call unmasked joy. This isn't the artificial brightness many women perform after years of believing they must be endlessly upbeat to be lovable. No. Unmasked joy is the quiet, effortless aliveness that appears when a woman has made peace with her own story, its triumphs, its wounds, its complexities. It's the joy of someone who laughs without calculating, who allows light into her life without demanding it, who embraces her imperfections without turning them into excuses or tragedies. To the male brain, this joy lights up the same neural pathways activated by natural reward systems. In simple terms, he begins to associate her presence with emotional nourishment, not emotional labor. And yet, the most powerful shift I've ever witnessed came not from joy, but from a single sentence spoken by a woman who had spent years chasing the approval of men who could never meet her depth. She said, "I stopped worrying about whether he liked me. I started focusing on whether I liked myself." And in that moment, years of conditioning shattered. Because the instant a woman evaluates a man instead of auditioning for him, the entire axis of attraction flips. The man stops observing and starts pursuing. The balance of power resets to its natural, healthy state. But all of this authenticity, presence, joy, leads to something even more profound. Communication from a woman's emotional center. A woman who speaks from her grounded truth, not her fear, creates a resonance impossible to replicate. Her words carry weight, not because she tries to make them powerful, but because they rise from a place within her that is whole. There is no rush to prove, no desperation to be understood, no anxiety to win approval. And men feel this instantly. It's not the content of what she says, it's the energy behind it. Even the simplest conversation becomes unforgettable when filtered through emotional clarity. Yet perhaps the rarest quality of all is how she listens, not to fix, not to analyze, not to earn closeness, but simply to witness. A mature man is not aroused by a woman who attempts to play therapist or rescuer. He is moved by the woman who offers presence without losing herself, empathy without over-identification, connection without fusion. In her presence, he feels something beyond attraction. He feels seen without being stripped, held without being restrained. And what many women never realize is that this kind of presence, steady, centered, quietly powerful, is the birthplace of something men rarely experience yet deeply crave: emotional sovereignty. A woman who does not outsource her emotional state, who does not expect a man to regulate her storms or validate her sunshine, who can feel deeply without becoming unmoored, is magnetic in a way that defies logic. Emotional sovereignty is not cold independence, it is warm self-possession. It's the quiet strength of someone who can say, "I feel this, but I am not ruled by it," and in doing so, she creates a spaciousness in which connection can actually breathe. A mature man instinctively recognizes this. His nervous system reads it as stability, as a promise that the relationship will not turn into an arena of unprocessed emotions or unpredictable explosions. He senses not cognitively but viscerally that she will not collapse into him or weaponize her vulnerability or seek rescue disguised as intimacy. And because of this, he relaxes in her presence. He unguards. He lets himself be human, not heroic. And this is where true intimacy begins, in that quiet moment when both people feel safe enough to stop performing. Yet emotional sovereignty has a shadow side when misunderstood. Too many women mistake emotional transparency for emotional exposure. They share everything, every wound, every fear, every trauma, long before trust has been built, not because they lack self-awareness, but because they've been taught that vulnerability equals connection. But true vulnerability is not an uncontrolled flood. It is a gentle opening that happens in rhythm with trust. A man is not inspired by a woman who unravels herself on the second date. He is overwhelmed. He feels responsible for emotions he never earned access to. And overwhelm, in male psychology, often disguises itself as withdrawal. I once worked with a woman who couldn't understand why men disappeared after glimpsing her past. When we explored deeper, it became clear. She wasn't being vulnerable, she was seeking emotional adoption. And that, to a mature man, signals not intimacy but instability. When she learned the difference, everything changed. She discovered that boundaries don't limit connection, they deepen it, because only what is revealed gradually can be cherished deeply. This gradual revelation is the heartbeat of what I call sustained curiosity, the quiet spark that keeps a man psychologically, emotionally, and even spiritually engaged over time. Not because a woman withholds herself, but because she continues to evolve. A woman who has her own inner world, who reads, reflects, questions, creates, explores, does not need to invent mystery. She is mystery, not by strategy, but by nature. Her growth makes her unpredictable in the most enticing way. A man feels that every conversation with her shows him a new angle of her mind, a new shade of her heart, a new texture of her being. She is alive in motion, never fully known, yet never manipulative. Men often describe these women using phrases like, "She always surprises me," or "I never know what she'll say next," or "She makes me curious without even trying." They aren't referring to drama or artificial suspense. They're describing the rare experience of meeting a woman with layers, A woman who unfolds instead of explodes, who reveals instead of performs, who grows instead of stagnates. And to a man who has walked through predictable patterns and rehearsed personas, this unfolding is intoxicating. What fuels this sustained curiosity more than anything is inner richness. A woman who cultivates her mind becomes a source of endless fascination. Whether she discusses philosophy, art, relationships, science, literature, or simply the way she perceives the world, her insight creates a gravitational pull. Men do not fall for information, they fall for perspective, for the unique way a woman experiences life. Her curiosity awakens his curiosity, her growth inspires his own. And suddenly, he finds himself wanting not just her, but the world that comes alive through her eyes. Yet, with all this depth, all this evolution, the most extraordinary women possess something even rarer, the ability to create emotional refuge without slipping into the role of a healer. A space where a man can confess his fears without feeling judged, where he can be imperfect without fear of disappointing her, where he can release rather than defend. But unlike the women who overextend themselves to fix or interpret every emotional nuance, she does not annihilate her own boundaries in the name of care. She listens without dissolving. She comforts without absorbing. She supports without sacrificing herself. And because she does not try to become his savior, he feels safe enough to become real. I'll never forget a moment in my practice when a man, after years of emotional self-protection, finally said, "With her, I don't have to be perfect. I don't have to hide the parts of myself I'm not proud of. I can simply exist." The relief on his face was something indescribable, the relief of a man who had finally stopped performing strength long enough to experience connection. This is emotional refuge, not therapy, not rescue, presence. But the danger arises when refuge becomes fusion, when empathy becomes entanglement, when connection becomes codependence. Many relationships collapse not because there is too little love, but because the boundaries around love dissolve. Men, especially mature ones, pull away instinctively when they sense emotional merging. They feel suffocated, responsible, diminished. What they crave instead is closeness with space, intimacy with air, love with individuality. A woman who can offer warmth without losing herself is more desirable than any fantasy, because she offers something no illusion can sustain, real connection that does not cost her soul. And this is where emotional erotic tension is born, not from games or withholding, but from balance. The balance between closeness and autonomy, between availability and self-prioritization, between shared moments and private worlds. A woman who remains rooted in her own life, her passions, her routines, her friendships, her solitude radiates a subtle energy that calls a man toward her again and again. He desires her not because she is absent, but because she is whole. And the truth that often goes unspoken is that mystery doesn't disappear because two people grow close. It disappears when one person abandons themselves to maintain closeness. A woman who keeps her individuality alive, who doesn't dissolve into her relationship like ink in water, naturally sustains the kind of tension that keeps a man's attention awake. Not the anxious tension of uncertainty, but the magnetic tension of possibility. It's the subtle awareness that there is always another layer to discover, another thought unfolding within her, another dream forming in the quiet corners of her mind. She does not reveal everything at once because she is too vast to be revealed in a single moment. Her life is not a performance but a landscape, and he is invited to explore it slowly, not conquer it instantly. This is why total transparency, when given too soon or too completely, so often extinguishes desire. What begins as a romantic eagerness to connect quickly becomes emotional saturation. A man cannot long for what is always available, cannot be captivated by what holds nothing back, cannot feel curiosity toward what has already placed its entirety in his hands without discernment. Emotional, erotic tension thrives in rhythm, in the dance between openness and privacy, in the flow between intimacy and selfhood. When a woman embraces selective availability, not as a strategy, but as an honest reflection of her self-respect, she signals to a man that her time, attention, and energy are precious resources, not commodities freely dispensed. And something in the mature male psyche responds to that, not with withdrawal, but with devotion. For a man who has known chaos, a woman with boundaries is not a barrier, she is a sanctuary. Her standards are not walls, but architecture, the structure that holds the relationship upright. Selective availability becomes the compass through which a man orients himself. He learns that her yes means something because her no is real. He begins to rise, to refine himself, to approach her with intention. Men may chase what is easy, but they commit to what is valuable, and value is never found in what is indiscriminately accessible. But among all the forces that shape mature attraction, one stands apart in its quiet yet seismic influence: mutual inspiration. A relationship built not on need, desperation, or dependency, but on admiration, reciprocal, expanding, elevating admiration. When a woman lives her life with purpose, when she pursues her passions with sincerity rather than performance, when she treats herself with dignity, her presence becomes a catalyst. Something in the man beside her awakens, not the desire to compete with her, but the desire to evolve alongside her. Her excellence calls forth his own, not through pressure, but through emotional resonance. I've seen couples who have sustained desire for decades, and the secret is never youthful beauty, flawless communication, or compatibility tests. It is mutual elevation, each person continuing to grow, not for the other, but in the presence of the other. They remain admirable, they remain interesting, they remain in motion. Admiration, when nurtured, becomes the oxygen of long-term attraction. Not the superficial admiration of accomplishments, but the deep admiration of character. How one handles adversity, how one treats others, how one speaks about the world, how one carries themselves when no one is watching. One couple I met came to therapy not because they were broken, but because they wanted to understand how to deepen a love that had already endured 15 years. What struck me wasn't how much they knew each other, but how much they didn't claim to know. Each still saw the other as a universe in motion, changing, expanding, becoming. Their respect was palpable, their admiration alive. They didn't love the versions of each other they met years ago, they loved the people they were still becoming. And that, more than anything, is what keeps attraction young while the world around them grows older. Yet another trait consistently emerges in the most captivating women: emotional generosity without self-erasure. A kind of giving that flows from inner abundance, not inner lack. These women give because they are full, not because they are empty and hoping to be filled. Their gestures, small, thoughtful, sincere, carry warmth without expectation. They can celebrate their partner's victories with genuine joy because they do not need to tie his success to their worth. They can support him without resenting the effort because they do not offer more than they can afford to lose. They can love freely because they love themselves well. This is the difference between generosity and self-sacrifice, a difference many women tragically blur. Generosity stems from alignment, sacrifice stems from abandonment. A generous woman says, "I give because I choose to." A self-sacrificing woman says, "I give because I hope you will choose me." One creates attraction, the other creates emotional debt. And a man, especially a mature one, can feel the difference instantly, even if he cannot articulate it. True generosity also shows itself through space giving, the ability to allow a partner's emotional rhythms to exist without personalizing them. A mature woman understands that distance is not disinterest, that solitude is not rejection, that a man's inner world is not a threat to her security. She knows that relationships breathe, expand, contract, and settle. She knows that love is not measured by constant closeness, but by the quality of presence when closeness returns. And because she trusts the connection becomes worthy of trust. But perhaps the rarest and most magnetic quality of all is conscious emotional stability, the ability to feel deeply without losing perspective, to experience emotion without surrendering to chaos. A woman who embodies this stability becomes a calming presence in a world that exhausts even the strongest men. She does not dramatize the insignificant, does not catastrophize the temporary, does not confuse discomfort with danger. Her steadiness gives the relationship a center of gravity. A man who moves through a stressful world, carrying responsibilities no one sees, finds in her not another source of pressure but a place to land. Her emotional clarity becomes a lighthouse in the fog. Her stability becomes a form of beauty deeper than appearance, the beauty of peace. And in a culture obsessed with intensity, peace becomes the rarest and most captivating form of desire. And this is where everything we've explored converges into a truth that quietly defines every lasting love story I've ever witnessed. The woman who most profoundly captivates a mature man is the one who doesn't need to. Not because she is detached, not because she is indifferent, but because she has already built a life rich enough to hold her happiness regardless of who walks into it. Her fulfillment is not a performance, it is the soil from which every genuine connection grows. Her self-knowing becomes a compass, her self-respect becomes a boundary, her evolution becomes a living invitation not for someone to complete her, but for someone worthy to join her. Personal abundance manifests in the smallest, most human ways, in the comfort she feels in her own company, in the passions she cultivates without applause, in the friendships that nourish her spirit, in the dreams she nurtures quietly in the background. It shows up in how she treats herself on the days no one is watching. It colors the way she walks into a room, not seeking validation, not shrinking, but simply arriving as herself. And a man can sense this abundance the way one senses warmth when stepping into sunlight. It is not loud, it is not boastful, it is undeniable. This is why psychological arousal, in its truest form, cannot be manufactured. It cannot be optimized, scripted, or hacked. It arises naturally from the internal architecture of a woman who has chosen to live with intention. A woman who has learned to close the chapters that wounded her, to extract wisdom from the pages that bruised her, and to carry forward only the truths that strengthen her. A woman who does not demand perfection from herself, yet refuses to abandon the pursuit of her highest self. A woman who understands that real love is not built by two halves merging, but by two wholes amplifying one another. Because the moment two complete people meet, the relationship is no longer a search for rescue, it becomes a space for expansion. Instead of clinging, they uplift. Instead of fearing loss, they cultivate presence. Instead of filling voids, they grow gardens. And this is the true, quiet magic that emerges when authenticity meets maturity. Both people become better, not because they were broken before, but because love becomes a shared evolution. This is why, after decades of guiding hearts through their most vulnerable transitions, I've learned that the foundation of attraction is never strategy, it is self-elevation. The work you do within yourself is not just preparation for love, it is the very thing that magnetizes a different kind of love toward you. The kind that recognizes you, the kind that respects you, the kind that meets you where you truly are, not where you pretend to be. So, if there is one message to carry with you, let it be this. You do not attract what you chase, you attract what you are. And when you become a woman who is whole within herself, warm yet sovereign, open yet grounded, loving yet discerning, you do not fear whether a man will choose you. You become far more interested in whether you will choose him. If you've felt something shift within you while listening, perhaps a soft recognition of your own strength, or a reminder of who you were before the world told you who to be, hold on to that. Let it breathe, let it grow. And if you want to keep exploring these deeper layers of yourself, if you want more insights that help you not only understand love, but rise within it, then stay close. HeartSync X is a space for those ready to meet themselves with honesty, courage, and compassion. And when you're ready for the next step of your own evolution, I'll be right here walking with you, one truth at a time.